City of Stevens Point Public Protection Committee meeting, recorded August 12, 2019.
I will call the Public Protection Committee to order. I have 8:58 on my clock, so that's the time we'll go with. First item on the agenda is an appeal of notice service charge for property maintenance violations. The first one is 1950 Water Street. Is someone here representing that address? Anybody that would like to address that issue?
I move to deny the appeal.
Okay, we have a motion to deny.
A second.
A second by Alder Dugan. Any discussion? Okay, we'll call a vote in favor of,
Might be in the other room.
There was people here earlier that wanted to appeal. Okay, just go check, make sure they're not going to go.
okay, I didn't know there was anybody still left over there.
I thought the room was empty. Somebody said the room was empty,
No,
so
I think that he just said.
It's
there
about
was
to be.
Nobody in the room that wanted to,
Oh, there was no one? Okay, I was gonna say, I didn't think,
You're good.
okay. Okay, so we have a motion to deny, so all in favor of denial, vote aye.
aye.
Opposed? No. So the motion carries. The second item is 0 Wellsby Avenue. Someone here from Wellsby? Speak to Wellsby? Go ahead to the podium, sir, and name and address for the record. These guys must have a class.
My name is Jeff Vaughter, 418 Cedar Street, Village of Whiting, Stevens Point taxpayer. I'd like to read a letter that, or the letter that I wrote in response to, I guess the service charge is for failure to maintain property. More specifically, I believe mowing the grass. A little bit of background on the property that I am referencing. We bought the vacant property in question from the city, actually it was on county tax deed, about 6 years ago. Actually, it was in 2011. It has no frontage on any street, no surveying corner markers that we could find, and no utility services of any kind. The property had been neglected for a number of years. After clearing out the trash, which was mostly used tires, we mowed the site and planted about a dozen trees to improve the lot. Only, says 2, but only one of those 12 trees survived to today. A year or two later, we bought another 60 blue spruce trees and planted them on 3 sides of the lot, again to improve the lot. This time we trucked in water once or twice weekly to try and improve the chances of the trees surviving. We continued to mow the lot at that time. None of those trees survived. The limiting factor for trees to take hold seems to be heat and water. The lot is simply too hot and dry for desirable trees to establish and survive. To rectify this, we decided to cease mowing and allow the grassy vegetation on the lot to grow, providing heat resistance, water retention, and organic structure to the soil. A walking of the property will find few plants designated as weeds to be in excess. There are some, but not in excess. It is our plan to attempt to plant trees again when the condition of the lot has improved. As longtime members, for 25 years at least, of the Arbor Day Foundation, we understand the value of trees. With Stevens Point as a designated tree city, we are in good company. Rather than insisting that we mow this site, we petitioned the city and asked for the opportunity to improve the lot by allowing trees to generate at this site. Please bear in mind that to permit trees to grow on this site will not only improve the site, but will also improve the neighborhood by reducing heat, retaining moisture, and fixing CO2. It is our feeling that to require mowing of this site for aesthetic reasons is unnecessary and counterproductive. I'd like to go over some of the facts too, as far as why I was contacted to mow this site against my better judgment. This letter is from Mark Cordes, and well, this one sentence says, after reviewing the lot, I had a conversation with both Alder Johnson and then Director Ostrowski relative to this lot. It was determined that given he, being me, had maintained, mowed in the past, a notice of violation should be sent. So the basis of this violation is I had mowed it in the past. Well, my reason for mowing it has changed. I'm trying to retain moisture now. Not only that, as I mentioned before in my opening letter, when we got the lot, we found a number of trees and other minor refuse on the property. Now, at that time, the growth, the vegetation on the lot hid this from public view. And it was our view, if we were going to stop this site from being used as a litter site for the neighborhood, and I know where some of those tires came from, and it was from the neighborhood, in order to deter this, I should mow the site. It's harder to hide refuse on a mowed lot. So that was part of our reason. So it goes to argue that it was determined to cite me because I mowed in the past, but have discontinued it. And I explain why we discontinued it. The complaint, I think that's shown on page 12, it says, please, the condition, please cut grass/weeds prior to due dates, etc. And the ordinance cited says excessive weeds, grass at nuisance height. Now, what is nuisance height? I would argue that 2 inches of grass is a nuisance height if you're on a putting green. It's relative. 3 feet of grass may not be a nuisance if it's on the prairie. It's relative to the situation. This lot has very, very little traffic, and to just call it traffic is a stretch. If you were to do a traffic survey on this well, what do they call that? Alley, excuse me. If you were to do a traffic survey on this alley, you'd come up with 0, I think, most of the time. There's absolutely nobody driving down it. I have yet to see a car travel down there. There was a moving van that went once, 1 year. And part of the reason is the alley doesn't go from one place to another. It just goes from one street to another. Well, use the street if you want to get to the other street then. It just makes sense. Not only that, on the north end of this alley, the drop off from the level of the alley to the street is extreme. If you don't have a pickup with a fairly high elevation, you're going to bottom out your car. Just another deterrent for people using this alley. There is no traffic, virtually no traffic on this alley. Now, I would argue if the grass is tall on this lot and it obstructs view, traffic view, you don't see a car pulling in or out of a lot, then that would be excessive. But there is no traffic back there, almost none. So what is the nuisance? A couple of points were brought on this same lot last Monday in a petition that I had to use this site as a parking or a facility to park a trailer and an RV, at least get some use of this site. One of the neighbors brought up a point that somehow my lot had something to do with the sand running down the alley and getting in and clogging up the sewer. I never saw the connection myself, but she brought that up. Well, if I develop this lot or allow the grass and vegetation to retain moisture more, it's less likely to run down the alleyway and clog up the sewers, the drainage sewers. So I would say that's a positive to allow the vegetation grow and trap and retain the moisture. Another point brought up is that neighbors may be induced to come on my lot, and I think one of the complaints was that they might get picked by one of the honey locust thorns. Okay, well, I'd be willing to put up no trespassing signs on this lot if that's what it takes to keep people out. I don't do that. I don't like that because I think it takes away from a neighborhood. I think if everybody put no trespassing signs up, it wouldn't look like a friendly neighborhood at all. And I personally don't mind if people go on this property. If they get picked, that's their own fault. Let's see. Oh, I would also like to say that in the many times that I visited this site, particularly when I was trying to restore or get some trees planted and growing there, I've never seen any nuisance animals on there, being rats, mice, skunks, anything that you may deem a nuisance. Maybe an occasional rabbit or squirrel, and that's about it. So I would say my argument for not forcing me to mow that lot is, one, I'm retaining moisture. And I'm trying to do that to make the neighborhood better, to induce trees to grow there, make a better environment. There is no upside to mowing that I can see. So, are there any questions from any of the elders?
I don't think so. Any other comments from anyone else in the audience? Alder Johnson.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, yes, it's been a long evening. Melissa Johnson, District 5, thank you very much. The last I had communications I had with Mr. Cordes on this property, I thought the plan was to mow back 5 feet from kind of the edge of the alley. And I thought that was good. I thought it was agreed upon. This started, I received a contact from a person living nearby who thought it looked terrible. Whatever, that was an opinion. She also thought she saw a turkey living there, and I'm not sure. I think one of the neighbors has chickens, so regardless. So I thought it was resolved, and that Mr. Vaughter was going to mow back about 5 feet to make it a little bit an indent into the property. So that's how I got involved, and my last communications with Mr. Cordes was, yep, I talked to Mr. Vaughter, he's gonna mow back 5 feet, and then I didn't hear anything else after that until I saw it on the agenda, so. But I did have a conversation with Mr. Cordes about, what is our policy on undeveloped lots? This is an undeveloped lot. And if this was on the edge of the city, we would let it grow. It's sitting in the middle of a community, along between Center and Dixon. So I couldn't answer that question. What is our policy on undeveloped lots and whatever our expectation for maintenance on those? So that was a conversation I had with Mr. Cordes, and I give it to you now. Thank you.
Can I make 2 points on that?
Okay, want to give you every opportunity to make your case here.
Okay, thank you. Mark Cordes did ask that we mow that, and I had mowed it. Okay, and we'll do that. Okay, there's, again, so little traffic on there. The idea of mowing it is to keep an open visual pathway, but there's no traffic. But we'll do that anyway. I'm trying to think of my second comment. Oh, yes. The lot is undeveloped. So how do you maintain undevelopment? Mowing it would be developing it, wouldn't it? So, thank you.
Speaking to undeveloped lots, I know out in District 7, there's a vast expanse of open lots that are not mowed, probably need to be mowed right on the edges, because even now riding a bike, it's hard to see traffic. But the vast part of the lot is not mowed, and it's not really an issue out there. So guess I'd be looking for a motion unless anybody has a comment.
I would like to make a few comments, and then I'm happy to follow through with a motion for you. My first thoughts on this, in terms of the condition and the ordinances being cited, particularly the first one, Chapter 21, Section 3, Number 17. I'm pretty sure that it doesn't say in the ordinances excessive weed/grass. My understanding is that title of that section is noxious weeds, and my own assessment of the biological species on those, there wasn't, I didn't see any of the Canadian thistle, leafy spongewood, any of the ones delineated in this that the Wisconsin statutes laid out. And so I think that, and you can only really take an assessment of that from that driveway unless Coordinator Cordness was walking into this property. The second part talks to allowing vegetative matter that would harbor rodents and insects. I think particularly the rodents one is the one that this is addressing because there's insects in every single lawn, and I think that is obviously something I plan to address in next month's meeting, and because that sort of language doesn't actually, it's impossible to enforce. And so if that's what's being cited here, then I have a lot of problems with the execution of these ordinances. And then the third one, no person may maintain or permit a public nuisance. It seems like there was a single complaint that drove this notice, and there was a single complaint that drove a different notice later in the packet, and that ordinance was not cited as part of so exactly what qualifies as a public nuisance. I'm a part of the public. I don't see it as a nuisance, and I think this individual's complied and has intentionality with it, and I would like to make a motion to approve this appeal, and I think if at the very worst we could do here was table this item until maybe pending code addresses the situation here, which it seems like Coordinator Cordis at the end of his letter discusses that there may be some language addressing native plantings in the future. So I would like to make a motion to approve this appeal.
And I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the appeal. All those in favor of...
Oh,
Discussion.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, we can have discussion on the motion, yes.
we have rules here. The city has vacant lots on Henrietta Street. They cut them. They're unimproved. We have them all over the city. They're cut. They're cleaned up. There's no mice running around, and they just need, if you don't want to cut your grass, I guess maybe you need to live in whiting or plover. We have rules here in Point, and there's too many people that are trying to skate the rules.
Mary.
I want a nice-looking neighborhood. I expect them to cut their grass, just like I do, and whatever else. And whatever it is in ordinance form, you're gonna open up a can of worms here that everybody say, I'm not gonna cut my backyard, I'm not gonna do nothing with it.
Mary.
You know how I'm voting.
I think sometimes you have to take into consideration the uniqueness of the lot. If this was on a city street with traffic driving by constantly and seeing this, what appears to be an overgrown vacant lot, I think it would be, I might have a different opinion. It seems to me, the way this lot is situated, the public doesn't really see it. As Alder Dalton stated, there are insects everywhere. We have little critters in my neighborhood too, and everybody mows their lawn. So I don't necessarily agree that cleanly mowed lawns reduce critters. That's just my opinion. So, Alder Dalton.
Yeah, my final point that I want to make about the excessive weeds and grass at nuisance height is that my understanding, talking with Coordinator Cordness, is that 7 inches is used as a guideline to enforce this rule. But however, there is no definition of what a nuisance height is, and you could say 7 inches, you could come back and say 8 inches one day after rain. And I think that is the question here, and I have a very strong problem with it being forced as an administrative guideline as opposed to something that is specifically articulated.
Alder Dugan.
Yeah, just one more comment. I would be, voting in favor of the approval. But I think the other thing that's important, and you mentioned it, was the intentionality, because I think this gentleman does want to comply in some way, and will, in the future, do that. But I think it's time that we talked about some of this. And then once we talk about it and perhaps change things a little bit, then we need to stick by it.
It does seem to be open to interpretation.
It sure does, yeah.
I guess I mentioned the subject because I think the majority of the people in my district want you to cut your grass and obey the rules. I think you two are personal opinions. I think your constituents would agree that they'd like the people in their neighborhood to be cutting their grass. Say no more.
Is there not, this perhaps is a question for Director Ostrowski while he's still here. You have obviously something to say.
Just a little bit.
Is there not an accommodation in the city to keep a lawn or a yard in a more natural
There is.
So that's why this is
habitat?
before you. So some of this is relative, as Mr. Vaughter has indicated. We've got several lots, let's say up on the north side. You go up by Forest in Georgia where you have 4 acres of undeveloped land. It's all wooded. We typically require them to cut the shoulder about 5 feet in to make sure that you don't have vision of deer popping out and drivers can see that coming out. This lot is a little bit different. It's in the inner core of the city, but it's on an alley that doesn't front on a road. I think from a staff perspective, I don't care if he cuts this one. It's kind of a unique lot, but that's what I think you should make your basis on, not by, I think, an ordinance interpretation. I think the basis is the uniqueness of this lot. It's not really a developable lot. It's fronting on an alley, and I think if they keep the 5 feet of clearance to see if anything pops out when people are going down the alley, people do still go down the alley. I don't think our office would have an issue with that, but I think it's basing it off the uniqueness of that, and that's why it's before you. If this was a large lot on the edge of the city, 2, 3, 4 acres in size, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to cut it. But to Alder Dalton's point as well, you should start seeing some ordinance amendments coming in the next 2 months that would address this. Typically, if we have an inner city lot, we would require a natural vegetation plan, which people have submitted, and they stick to that.
Okay. So that would be an option for this property owner to submit a natural.
Right, so if that was submitted, we could approve that internally, but this is just, we're gonna let it overgrown just because it's a lot that isn't visible really from the public right away, except for an alley. It's kind of behind, it's not developable. There's not much you can really do with this lot.
Any questions from, or more comments from the committee? Anybody else in the audience? Okay, so we have a motion to approve the appeal. All those in favor vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-1. The next address, 2425 Ellis, has been pulled, I understand.
Actually, I do have a couple of comments on that. We thought we were gonna have a resolution on that. So Mr. Cordes had sent this violation to the property owner, and then sent a subsequent one because they did some painting, but didn't finish it. Had another conversation with the property owner, indicating that we would be willing to waive the fee if they fix the fence. They have no intention on fixing the fence. So it is still before you. The hole in the fence will remain, and they have no intention on making it structurally sound based off his conversation with the property owner. So.
I move to deny that appeal. At 2425 Ellis.
Yeah, second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Comments? I know that individual contacted me thinking she was in my district. She's actually in District 5, I believe. Her main concern was that it wasn't quite clear what she was supposed to fix. The first letter, she did some stuff on the front of the house, but didn't do anything to the side, because she said that it wasn't clear what she was supposed to do.
And that's why we were going to waive the service charge,
Okay.
with the indication that they would comply with what the violation is. But based off of Mark's comments and conversation with her, they're leaving the fence as is.
So where does that leave us then? With still a fence that needs repair? If the, do we need a motion if this has been waived?
Not been waived.
It's not been waived.
Not been waived.
Oh, it has not been waived, I'm sorry.
No.
So we have
I thought it
a
was, I misheard then.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we have a motion to deny.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay. Call the question. Those in favor to deny would vote aye.
I,
Opposed? Okay. Appeal is denied. Now we're on to 2533 Patch Street. Is any, okay, we have a gentleman from Patch, or the property owner. Name and address for the record, please.
J. Wolf, 1600 Michigan Avenue. I know you guys want to get out of here as quick as possible too, so it's pretty simple. So this property is something I recently took ownership of, and I took ownership in January, but I didn't take actual it's not a residence, it's a building. Didn't actually take over until earlier this summer. Never got the first notice, and I had talked to, I've gotten these notices before. I know what comes if you don't do it. I fix them, and I never got one. As soon as I got the actual bill, I wanted to see what the appeal process was. As I was taking over, the building, not something that I went to terribly frequently, but I guess I used just a little bit of, I've never owned an industrial building before, so I used just what was a little bit of around me to try to get a gauge for what expectations were for upkeeping. And if you look at page 25, that's directly across the street from the property here in question. And being on a sidewalk, to me, that looks a bit excessive. And so I was under the assumption, and apparently not rightfully so, that the weeds that I did have that weren't covering a sidewalk, not going into the street, but maybe were a little bit taller than reasonable, or I forget the term that's been used here, but I didn't see that they were creating any issue. Never got the notice. I'm more than happy to continue to comply, as now knowing that what's shown on page 25, even though it still looks like that over a month after I took the photo, is apparently okay on the opposite side of the street. Just want to get this thing taken care of, because I never got the notice is really the big key. I don't know, any questions?
Anybody on the committee have a question for Mr. Wolf?
So were you able to communicate with Coordinator Cordis after you received the bill then about what the standard is asked? And
I did, yeah. We spoke at good length. It was a good conversation, and I mowed the lawn yesterday morning. It's not a question of wanting to or not. I wasn't aware that I was out of compliance, I guess, and plan to keep it in compliance, and just want to get this taken care of.
Okay. Any other comments? Anybody in the audience? Director Ostrowski?
Yeah, the notices were sent both to the same address. I'm not sure why one would have been received and one was not. We sent our contractor out there. The city did incur the cost, at least of the contractor, to mow the grass. So typical standard protocol was followed on this lot.
Can you speak to the lot across the street and why that one is?
Sure. It's owned by the city, and those departments have been made aware to cut that portion of the right-of-way.
So does the city charge themselves?
In a way, I suspect, because we're paying city staff to do the work. So, yeah. So we have.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the appeal.
Looks like the motion will die for lack of a second. Do we have another motion?
I'll make a
Alder
motion
Dugan?
to deny.
To deny. Motion
Second.
second by Alder Phillips. Okay. All those in favor of denial?
Is there any discussion?
I would
Further?
like to
Do you want to have
discuss
more
further.
discussion? By all means.
Well, it looks like someone has stepped up to the podium and
Oh, okay,
So-
I'm sorry.
just been.
Hi, Orrin Jacobson, 1579 Church Street. I was struck in the earlier conversation by Alderperson Phillips talking about people in this community wanting people to follow the rules. I've been a little confused about these particular property violations for a while, as a number of people I have known have received violations for not cutting their lawn. And in reading the ordinances, there is no rule that says you need to cut your lawn. Now, there seems to be a possibly unwritten administrative rule that's being carried out by the department. However, in reading the ordinances, it does not say that if your grass gets over 7 inches, you need to cut it. In fact, it's hard to find anywhere that's written other than it being spoken here. So to follow the rules, especially as you state, Alderperson Phillips, you have to be able to know what they are. And right now, it seems the only way that people figure out what the rule is with grass is to have conversations with staff after they've received some kind of notice. And I think that's inappropriate. If we want a set of ordinances that describe exactly how people need to maintain their property, then that's what we should have. But what we currently have is ordinances that are being cited that refer to noxious weeds, of which grass is not, nor is grass listed. Ordinances that refer to rodents and insects. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest nuisance insects that I interact with is Japanese beetles, and they lay their larvae on cut grass. If you live next to a golf course, you're gonna have a ton of Japanese beetles. And every lawn that some people really like to see is actually the very source of the insect that is the biggest nuisance to me. So if we're gonna continue to play this game as if someone can just say, well, the rule is 7 inches, and if you don't cut your lawn because your grass is over 7 inches, then we're gonna cite you. I wanna see a citation to an ordinance that actually says you have to cut your lawn. Because, Mr. Phillips, we do not have that rule, and yet we are charging people for not doing it. If you want that rule, propose that as a rule. It is not the rule. And I would request that everybody who gets denied for this should be taking this to court. And I'd like to see our city attorney work his magic in trying to turn our noxious weed ordinance into an ordinance that says you have to mow, because that's not what it is. It's not what it says. And if you deny his appeal today based on him not mowing, then you're creating a rule out of thin air that you may very well have been enforcing for a while, but it hasn't been on the books. It's not a rule in this city, and it's not in the ordinances. So I think you should accept his appeal and everybody else and direct the department to stop giving people citations for not cutting their lawn until you've done your job of actually putting on the books the rules that you wish to enforce. Thank you.
Would the city attorney like to clarify any of the ordinances, or evidently not? Well, it looks like he's looking them up.
I guess in addition to, the city incurred the cost to mow, and I'd be more than happy to take care of that portion. I understand somebody went out, they did the work. But again, it's not a nuisance. It doesn't overhang the street. Call it an accident, no different than this meeting, me waiting here for 2.5 hours when my sheet says that 6:50 is approximate time. There's some things that just go above and beyond. I'd gladly pay the $45 that the city, but if I'm expected to take care of mine and the place across the street owned by the city, they don't have to take care of theirs, what kind of, give me an explanation. And that's overhanging sidewalk. It's around a corner where it invades vision. To deny this, but let that continue to grow it's crazy. And again, I'd be happy to pay the $45 because I know somebody went out and work was done, and that's a cost that's been incurred. But to actually have this as a violation, I think is wrong.
Attorney Beveridge.
So certainly if the council or any member of the council wants to see an ordinance drafted that specifically addresses lawns, Yeah, that can be done. With regards to putting in some sort of numeric value for the height of grass, that I would actually recommend strongly against. You picture a staff member out there with a ruler. Okay, this blade is 9 inches, it's in violation. But this one next to it's only 6.5. It similar to the same reasons I've given in the past to this same committee for why I would be against creating a noise ordinance that references specific decibel levels. It makes sense in certain contexts to have things be subject to a rule of reasonableness. I think when you talk about nuisance is a concept that goes back hundreds of years in the law. And there's a huge amount of case law on it to say, here's what's a public nuisance and here's what's not a public nuisance. Now, the way that things typically work is that certain things will be a per se public nuisance. Like if you have a situation of this type, it automatically by law is considered a public nuisance. But for other things, you just have to make arguments. You say, well, this is a hazard to calm enjoyment, public safety, whatever it is, depending on the context. That could be loud noise, that could be failure to maintain a property, it could be all kinds of things. Maintenance of some sort of noxious industry or activity on a property. But with regards to grass and weeds, it's primarily the harborage of rodents and insects. That is how it's been phrased in the ordinances. And you know, when you talk, if you were going to go to court about it, you'd say, well, here are the photos. What do you think, finder of fact, to the judge? And you'd make arguments. And the courthouse door is open for people, as we talk about appeals here later on with regards to the ordinance change that's coming up on the agenda. But you know, with these situations, there's a reason why a number of years ago we changed it so that on the first notice, there's no fee. It used to be that every year, whether it was snow removal or grass cutting, I mean, obviously those are the two things, snow removal and grass cutting, you'd have people coming in saying, I don't mind taking care of this, why should I have a $25 fee? We say, okay, well, you're endeavoring to take care of this in a timely manner, so we'll waive the fee. So instead of just dealing with a million of those, we changed it so that there was no fee for the initial notice. It was here you have some amount of time, and for grass and weeds, it's a week. For other types of things, it's longer, you know, case-by-case scenario. And if you have any questions, call this number and talk about it. I can't speak to what happened with regards to a notice here. I can look at the agenda and see that there's one in there dated June 19th, I think it was. But you know, there's a component of that cost that is the actual cost to the contractor that the city had to cut a check for. There's a component that's the administrative overhead. But you know, we've had a conversation before about exactly this over the phone privately, about having a standard for grass cutting that is, you know, I guess I would disagree that in current form it's not enforceable for vagueness, but it certainly could be more specific to lawns. So if that's something that this committee would like to explore, we can certainly put together some proposals for that. And I'd have to talk to Michael about the broader rewriting of the code that's going to be forthcoming. I'm guessing there are parts in there that address this type of thing. So I'll leave it to the committee. It's up to you to make determinations about the facts here. But I think as it's written, I think it's enforceable. I don't think it's unnecessarily vague.
Thank you. Any other comments?
So then just quick, I would also ask about the nuisance portion of it. Who am I creating a nuisance to? I don't have rodents. I have mice traps inside the building. I have yet to catch a mouse all winter, or excuse me, all summer. So I'm not harboring rodents. I'm not impeding anyone's vision. You know, again, I plan to fully comply with this going forward, but I really think that we should look at accepting the appeal.
Anybody else? Okay, I believe we have a motion to deny, correct? Those in favor of denial would vote aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
No? And now we have a tie.
Oh, gosh.
I'm not sure what we do in this regard since we don't have our fifth member.
We have.
I'll defer to the city attorney, but in the event of a tie, the motion fails.
Okay. So the motion to deny has failed. Do we then need another motion?
Well, you actually already had that.
You had that.
And it didn't get a second, so I would defer to the city attorney, but I
Could we do
believe
a
it
different-
stands.
Could we do a motion that had a different,
Has to be significantly
Yeah.
different, something, there's words.
Well, if this were a situation where where there was action being sought on some sort of bit of subject matter where there's a lot of different directions that could be taken, you could, in theory, have a third motion of some other type, but here it's really a binary decision. It's either either the appeal's granted or it's not. And you had one motion that failed, and you had another motion that failed. And I guess my first instinct is, therefore, no action is taken, and absent any sort of action to approve the appeal doesn't get granted. Now,
Just an idea. A substantive change would be a motion to postpone action until next month when all members could be present.
Uh-huh.
that's a very good idea.
It's dragging your feet, but yes.
Is it safe to assume the motion was going to be to not appeal or to not accept and not deny, but accept that I pay the bill that the city incurred and to waive the $100?
That,
No.
at this point, I think we just have to go with postponing
Yeah.
and then refer
Yes.
it back to.
Yes.
that motion would be in order.
Okay, that would be all right.
I don't think that the Department of Justice will come in here and bust our doors down for
Someone like.
violating Robert's rules.
Well, you can do
Because it can't go to the full council.
No, by ordinance, these matters, the buck stops with the committee. It's one of the few examples we have of that in our entire code.
Well, then, as the chair, I will move to postpone this until we have the full membership of the committee,
I'll
which
second.
would likely be next month. And we have a second. So approval to postpone would vote aye. We'll take a vote. Aye. And to not postpone, we'll vote no.
No.
So it looks like the postponement for a month passes. And I'm not sure how the last item on this agenda will affect this decision.
Yeah, I know.
So this probably is a better outcome than a flat-out denial at this point. So we'll put it off a month and see what happens in the meantime.
All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 2, our license list for the new operators, bartenders licenses, and renewal operators licenses. If there's no objection, we'll handle both at once. Chief, any comments, any concerns?
No issues.
Okay. Comments from alders, members of the committee? Okay, so,
Move approval.
And second.
okay. We have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those
Is that the second?
licenses are approved.
Who was the second on that?
Alder Dugan? Okay, number 3, temporary Class B picnic license for St. Peter Parish, 800 4th Avenue for the St. Peter Indian Buffet fundraiser on October 13th, 2019 at 800 4th Avenue. Sounds like it will be a good time. Any issues with that?
No issues.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve the temporary license, Class B license.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second by Alder Dugan. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have item number 4 is a renewal of a commercial animal establishment for the barking lot at 3432 Minnesota Avenue. Is there someone here from the barking lot to speak to the committee? No? Any issues with their renewal?
No.
Okay.
Move to approve that renewal?
Okay. Alder, and a second
Second.
by Alder Dalton. All those in favor would vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item number 5, I'd like to do those 3 items as well as one. I'll mention each separately. Special events and road closure requests. The first one is the Mother Teresa India Festival and Color Walk at Pacelli, September 14th. They're not asking for road closure, just informational,
Special event.
yeah, trying to think. Point Toberfest and the Blubber Run on September 21st. The Point Brewery, they are requesting some road closures. And Discover Downtown has been added due to the little rainstorm we had that day, as I recall. We got, what, about 42 inches of rain and half the trees blew down in the county. So we have those 3 items, and that will be held on September 14th. And it's the Downtown Business Alliance requesting the road closure on Main Street for that. So, Chief, any issues regarding any of those?
No issues.
Okay,
Move approval of both those, all 3 of those items?
okay.
I get your second first.
Do we have a second? Okay, Alder Dalton?
So I just wanted to point out that the Discover Downtown was planned, they had it, the wind blew it out. This now, on September 14th, is in conjunction with the Doshinki Harvest Festival, which will be a
Okay.
2-day event this year. The Saturday downtown, in conjunction with Discover Downtown, and then Sunday, they'll have their traditional event at the Moose.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. So we have a motion to approve. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 3.56, creation of an administrative appeals board that basically would take these kinds of appeals that we were just talking about out of this council and move to a board that would be made up of appointed individuals.
5 members.
So,
Maybe Logan?
is there any discussion beforehand?
I move to approve.
We'll get our city attorney up here to discuss this.
And I will second.
And we have a motion to approve and second.
I can certainly answer questions if anyone would like. Obviously took the comments we got. The primary comment was to have a hybrid of community members at large and members of the council. You can see I structured it to be a 5-member body with 2 members appointed from the council. The one odd thing was in the event that somebody who is a member from the council became no longer a member of the council during that term, and the idea there would just be to have them continue out their term and then appoint a new member from the council when that would occur. I did incorporate another exception to determinations that would be reviewed by this, and that would be, you'll see that line there, J, it says, ordered by the building inspector pursuant to 660413. Those are raise orders, and there's a statutory process for appealing those that's contained right within that provision of the statutes. So really, in theory, there's a catch-all that covers that already, but I wanted to put it in there specifically because we have had an uptick in those, and particularly some high-profile ones. I did incorporate a little bit of additional language about the denial of grant money or a thing of substantial value. That is something that's appealable in here, but I wanted to make it really clear that unless there were terms of a grant such that, if you check these boxes, which are subject to just being looked at, like what is the factual scenario here, if you meet all these qualifications, boom, you get this. If there's a level of discretion built in, like meeting these qualifications makes you eligible but still subject to approval, wanted to exclude that from being something that could be reviewed. Notice and order, okay, so we did include the issuance of notice or orders pursuant to 2113. That's the appeals that this body has been seeing. So those would go to this body then, which I think, that's something we talked about when this was originally discussed, just in terms of the timeliness. I mean, obviously, that took up a fair amount of time tonight. So I think that is pretty much it. Also included some information about the role of the chairperson and the selection of a chairperson. And then to remove the portion of Chapter 21 that currently sends appeals of those orders to this body. That's basically it.
I have a question.
Just a second, we'll go with the committee members first, then we'll go to the public, and then we'll come back to the committee.
My question is, just to be clear about the accountability of this board, because those decisions would not be going to full council. You know, there's a kind of a filtering of the mayor appointing all these people, and then those decisions being made. And then basically, if there was an appeal to that body, it would go to court.
That's correct.
Okay.
It would be reviewable by a court, and that's all incorporated into statutes. If you want to have the full council review everything, you can, but
Is there a requirement that you have to have an alderman on this committee?
2.
I'm glad one of them won't be me.
that's the other thing. It would afford some flexibility in terms of scheduling.
I think it's not a bad idea. Actually, it gets a little more representation from the citizenry on this appeals board other than just elected officials. But we are supposed to be representing our constituencies, so, but I think this is a pretty good idea as well. Comments now from the audience, questions? Go ahead, name and address again, Mr. Vaughter.
Jeff Vaughter, 418 Cedar Street, Whiting resident, Stevens Point taxpayer. Just, I'm a little vague on this appointment of this board. Is that appointed by one person, 10 people? Any two of you people on here, if you were to appoint this board, would appoint a different board. So could you clarify that a little bit? Who appoints this board? Mayor.
Let's see. Go ahead.
Recommendations are made to the council by my office. The process would be, if this gets approved next Monday, we would solicit applications from the general public. And then we would review those applicants internally. My office is responsible for making the recommendation. Council is responsible for approving or denying that. So everybody is involved in appointing.
Must you be a resident?
Yes, typically that's what happens. You have to be a city resident.
Better move into town.
Alder Morrow.
Sean Morrow, Alder 11. I think as an elected official, I think this is one of the jobs that we knew that we were going to have when we were first elected. And I think some of these decisions are hard, but I think this is also part of our job. I think this is why we ran for this office. This is one of the tasks that we have. It's not always an easy one. I mean, ordinances are up to interpretation at times, but I think this is part of our job. Plus, I am also against forming another like office, committee, and so on. I mean, that's something that I like about the city council. We're not the county who has 50 committees, I think. I mean, that we could get this all done in one night, even though it is kind of late. But again, this is part of our job. This is part of the response. This is the responsibility that we have. This is why we ran for this office. Thank you.
Alder Jennings.
Alder Jennings, District 1. I guess I also have, I share those concerns, and I just am also concerned about sort of the good old boys or good old girls club sort of thing. So we can end up having people that are, that's my neighbor, we're gonna let it slide. And District 1 and District 3, Alder Nables District, we are impacted by these issues, I would argue, much more or more than all the other districts. And we have worked hard. And we can credit Garrett Ryan with the first work on enforcing ordinances and getting things cleaned up and being consistent. And Alder Nabel and myself have worked really hard on these things. And we have made, I would argue, a real difference. When I look around this town and I see things, how things look now compared to 5 years ago, it's real different. And yeah, there's lots of things that have gone into that. But enforcement is a huge part of it. And we have a history in this community of having, prior to 2015, having alders that were buddies with whoever, and these things weren't enforced. Why have ordinances if they are not enforced? So I'm very concerned about this, and I'm already seeing a pattern develop where, okay, people are coming in and being even more aggressive about, I shouldn't have to cut my grass and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, this is also an economic issue. Why do people move to a community? Good schools, safe neighborhoods, good jobs, things like that. What do safe neighborhoods look like? Et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's all of these economic issues. So I don't have an answer, but I have real problems with, we have ordinances, but we're going to be arbitrary about how we reinforce them. That's just, I just don't get that. So thank you.
Thank you.
So if you remember back to the first time I spoke to the committee about this, I think the major point I was trying to drive home seems to be getting lost here, which is that you can either have this or not. State statute is there saying, if you don't have this, then here's the procedure you have to use. And what happened is we had somebody who had a couple fees that were imposed, went through this body, and then said, oh, now I want to have my 6813 rights. And we had to figure out a whole process off the cuff and go through a bunch of rigmarole. And then, of course, the person didn't come to the hearing. And now it's taking us to court in a different manner. It's a different story. But the purpose of this is to avail the city of its ability to opt out of that statutory chapter by creating our own process, which is in compliance with everything in there and has due process baked in. Because there are all kinds of determinations that are made by staff members or you name it, that in theory could be subject to an appeal by somebody. And if we don't have this type of, if we haven't planned ahead to create something that can hear this, we're left in lurch having to do it on the fly in an ad hoc manner. And that's a bad situation. Now, I think the suggestion, which I seem to be hearing here, of this takes the elected official responsibility away from the council. Well, first of all, this body is going to be 40% council members. But also, you got to remember, the Board of Appeals, the Board of Review, there's not a single member of the council on either of those. So you're talking about somebody wants to come in and appeal their $6 million property tax assessment. There's a lot more at stake there in terms of dollars than there are with anything that this board ever hears. And like I said, there's not a member of the council on it. So, certainly if you'd like to see it be 3 members of the council rather than 2, if you want to see it be all members of the council, that's absolutely fine. But the more, like I said, the more important thing here is that we're creating this standardized, vetted, it's adapted directly from what works for the city of Madison, and I'm pretty sure they've been to school on this stuff enough times. So I would encourage you to, if you want to address some of those particular concerns about the makeup of it, let me know. I can change it, just change a couple letters. But the overall thing, if you look at that legislative purpose at the very beginning, that's really why I brought this before you in the first place. So happy to answer any other questions about those particular aspects.
Any other comments? I know there's at least a couple other boards that the city has that don't have alders, like the airport and water and sewer, and they set rates, and and there will be alders on this committee, so I don't see that would be an issue. I would like this to go, obviously this will go to the full council as part of the consent agenda, but,
It'll be a voted, single.
because it's an
Ordinance
ordinance
change.
amendment, it would have to be voted on. So there is yet another action that will be taken beyond this. So folks will have another opportunity to make comments about this issue. Any other comments from anybody in the audience or on the committee? Okay, now we have Alder Dalton, did you?
I was gonna make an amendment to the language in section 5 about the composition, just altering the makeup from three council members from 2 to 3 council members.
We already have
There's a motion.
There's an amendment.
do you
though.
want to
Amendment to the
amend the
motion.
motion?
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
said.
Do we need a second
Yes,
for
you
that?
do.
Okay. Do we have a second for Alder Dalton's amendment? I'll second that. And discussion then on the composition of 3 alders and 2 residents of the city, as opposed to 2 or 3.
That's the amendment, we got to vote on the amendment.
Just one comment. Part of the reason that I envision us creating this is to offer a little more flexibility for the appellants, to allow them to, maybe they can't make a 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock Monday night meeting.
Or they don't have to be here for 3.5 hours before they.
Or they don't have to wait for 3.5 hours before they hear it. So part of that flexibility would be to have meetings of this committee at varying times. So I want to make sure that if we do the 3 alders, that we can find 3 alders. I know we have more than 3 that are retired, but we want to make sure that we're able to accommodate that at least.
I think one comment too about the composition, I think part of having more council participation in this is being closer and interacting with how those ordinances are so that we can execute our role in terms of legislating and making adjustments and really understanding how they are being enforced and implemented.
Okay. President Johnson.
So I don't know where we are in the motions and the amendments and all of that. I know that this microphone is generally not at that height. It was hit many times, but we'll just, with everybody talking with their hands. If I recall the original discussion about this, it was about trying to provide some flexibility, as the mayor said, for folks who are working second shift or third shift, can't make a meeting in the evening, have a 10 o'clock sort of meeting time or 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever the case may be. But I thought the other part of it is to engage more citizens so that they could be, sort of purveyors of the information that we work with, so that they can sort of be citizen activists about our ordinances and start sharing with their neighbors and friends why we do the things we do. And also, work with their friends and neighbors on these issues. So I thought it was really about 2 things: citizen engagement, which I think is really important, and flexibility for the appellant so that they are able to meet, come to the meetings with a flexible schedule. I would not support having 3 alders on. I think 1 is more than adequate. That alder can be like a liaison back to the council. But the more citizens we engage in this discussion, I think the better, because one of the biggest issues, I think, is lack of clarity, and this is where we can start having a real discussion. So, because they're going to give us the feedback that really is important for us to make decisions. So that's how I feel. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Final comment, I promise. My counter to that would be that the council a few years ago approved a salary for a position that was supposed to do a lot of that education and engagement, and so far has been mostly enforcing these ordinances, and we've had a lot of, or at least that is a significant portion of his role and responsibility, and we've seen a lot of communication errors and miscommunications as a part of this appeal process, and so I think asking for another sacrifice on behalf of citizens to participate is probably not the correct way to go about improving that education and communication.
Anybody else?
This is in response, because I can't not let it go unanswered. Mark Cordes has done a fabulous job with educating and coming up with ways to not be the hard hand of the city. And maybe people don't see that as much, but I think it was mentioned earlier this evening that previously you had a violation, you would get a citation. Since then, we have had warning stickers, the little tags that explain what the violation is, and we've gotten over 70% compliance by that, and that is due directly to Mark Cordes. And some of the other things, getting communities involved and having certain groups help people who aren't able to paint their house or cut their yard or trim their trees, that also is directly because of Mark Cordes. So there are a lot of good educational things and a lot of good helpful things that have come from that neighborhood improvement coordinator's office. Maybe the general public just doesn't see those as frequently.
I would echo the mayor's comments there. Our office has put forth a number of measures, from the pink tags to the alder notes that are coming. The one reason why you're seeing more appeals is because we include a comment in there. If you would like to appeal, here you go. This is how you do it. Prior to that, we never did that. So no one really even knew the appeal process existed. That's why you're seeing more appeals come forth every month. But from the notifications, most of the stuff that we're seeing is that a lot of it's grass. We can work on cleaning up certain ordinances, and that's fine. But from a public relations standpoint and working with citizens, I sit in my office, I can hear Mark on the phone every 5 minutes responding to something and working with people through these situations. So I think that's vastly improved. And quite honestly, in terms of the makeup of the committee, I too would echo Alder or Johnson's comments about one member of the council on the board acting as a liaison. I think then getting individuals with having some experience relating to maybe appeals and reviewing certain things like this, similar to what we do at the Board of Zoning Appeals or Board of Review for assessments, I think would be more appropriate.
Jeremy, did you? Oh. Anybody else?
So this is just the amendment right now.
Okay, so we have, we're going to vote on the amendment to move it from 2 alders to 3 alders. So all those in favor of that amendment would vote aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
Okay, so that amendment fails. Now we have a motion to approve and a second. So those
I'd like to make amendment to the motion to go down to 0 aldermen, other than a liaison from the council who would be a non-voting member, if I'm correct.
Ooh.
Clarification on that, if I may, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So your motion would be to remove any alders from appointment to the committee and adding an aldermanic liaison who is a non-voting member, bringing the total number to 6?
Yes. Because you want an odd number on there, 5 voters.
I understand. I just wanted clarification.
Is there a second? I don't know. You got to ask that.
I will also second that motion, just because.
Just because.
We did the first, okay, so we would stay with 5 members, as I understand.
5 voting members.
And an alder would be a non-voting liaison,
Correct, and none of the 5 voting members would be alders.
much like the Police and Fire Commission, which is independent. There is an alder liaison, but the alder liaison does not have, is not a voting member.
With the library board.
And the
Okay.
Tourism Commission.
Oh, yeah,
There's several like that.
okay, so not unusual in the city. Okay, so are there comments on the amendment? Looks like Alder Moore's going to sit down. Okay, so we have an amendment, then a motion to amend the,
You're doing real good. The motion to amend.
to amend, to make to have 5 members, 5 citizen, appointed members, and a non-voting alder liaison assigned to the committee. Okay, so those in favor of that amendment would vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that amendment actually carries. And then we go now to the motion to approve with the amendment
As amended.
as amended from, to just a non-voting alder liaison. So those in favor of the ordinance amendment,
No.
the ordinance
As amended.
as amended, thank you, would vote yes, or aye.
Is
So-
there any, there's still a question here. Is there any timetable a person could try it for a year or 2 years or not?
You could certainly put a sunset on that. However,
You can amend.
as a body, the alders, common council could rescind that at any time.
Thank you.
Just like any other decision that you make, you could do something today.
Right.
And a new council, or maybe
Sure.
you change your mind, you could
Sure.
change it next month. So by doing this, it is indefinite. However, a future council, at any time, could rescind this committee and bring it back to the original way.
Attorney Beveridge, any other comments? No?
Just to comment that I'm not a big fan of sunset clauses. Usually all they are is a way to play funny stuff with the federal budget. So.
Good point.
Okay, so any other comments before we address okay, so we have a motion to approve. All those in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
3-1, that motion is carried. And with that, we are adjourned at 10:09.
Videos of these meetings are available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.